So, I mean, one of the problems that we have when it comes to philosophy is that there is just so much content, and it is really difficult when it comes to revision to be able to remember everything. And I think one of the things that you would have been taught at GCSE is a concept called chunking, where you take the big knowledge and then you chunk it down into smaller, more manageable bite-sized pieces of knowledge. I mean, the whole BBC website is based on that. Um, Now, that only works up to a point. Because when you actually think about it, if you're taking a big piece of knowledge and then chunking it down into bite-sized pieces, then what you're actually doing is having lots and lots and lots of individual bits of information to try and remember. So if you look at the screen that's in front of you, so this is a really brief outline of epistemology, of the main headings in epistemology. It's not the detail. So when you look at it, when you look at the words there, you're kind of thinking, right, okay, how am I going to remember all of that is on the page? And like I say, that isn't everything. We know that isn't everything. And chunking only works if you know where you are going to put an individual piece of information. So, for example, you might spend a long time, revising infallibilism, but unless you know where infallibilism fits in with the big picture, then you are not really going to be remembering it, because you're not really understanding the context of why infallibilism is important, what questions it is trying to answer. And so what you need to be able to see is, where does it fit in with the big picture? And that's what we need to actually start doing. Okay, so I know what you do because I've done it myself. You take individual bits and go, right, I'm going to look at the JTB, and I'm going to look at the different arguments about JTB and infallibilism and reliabilism and no false lemmas and all that kind of stuff. And you spend a long time maybe looking at, okay, what is a lemma? What is a no false lemma? How does it fit in with, and then you're kind of thinking, well, I've just got so much to learn. But actually, if you can fit it into the big scheme of things, then you are more likely to remember it. So, for example, what we are actually trying to do when you're revising is that you're trying to memorize the textbook, aren't we? You know, we've all been there, we've all done it. You get the textbook out, you read through the textbook, and you try and memorize it almost as if it is a script for you to learn, as if you're an actor learning a script. We don't want to do that. You can't do that. It's impossible, really. Okay, so if we take the analogy of a story, what we want to do is tell a story. So if we take the Harry Potter books, now there are 7 of them, and some of them are really quite big books. Now, if you were to ask me, and you have all these individual pieces of information within the book, I might struggle if you just say, oh, which book does Dobby die in? Or which book does Hermione start her SPEW, Society Protection of Elvish Welfare, or something like that? I'll struggle to tell you. But if you ask me to tell the story, the basic story from start to finish of all 7 books, I would be able to tell you the story. I would be putting it in my own words. And as I start telling the story, things will pop into my mind and go, oh yeah, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then because that happened, this happened. Because I'm telling a story, and we remember stories really well because we see the connections between what is going on with the different characters and the different concepts and so on. And so what we need to try and do, instead of trying to memorize word for word the textbook, is to tell the story, is to see the connections. So one of the things that I would do if I was in your position is start off with the big picture. Okay. And so if we look at epistemology, we've got 3 main things there. What is knowledge? Perception as a source of knowledge, reason as a source of knowledge, and underneath there, some of the main ideas. Now, straight away, I can now begin to see the relationship between the different ideas. So we take perception as a source of knowledge. Okay, we have direct realism. Okay, what you see, what you get, basically. But there are going to be problems with that, which is why there are two other options: indirect realism and idealism. Now, I'm not going into detail, but I can see the relationship between them. I am not trying to revise idealism without making the connection between indirect and direct realism, without saying, okay, as I'm revising idealism, I'm fitting it into this main scheme of perception as a source of knowledge, as opposed to reason as a source of knowledge. Now, there's an awful lot of detail that we would need to actually pad all this out for you to be able to write a good essay, clearly. But if I can begin to see the connections and the relationships of the main ideas and why one leads to another, that is going to help me remember it. Okay? What I don't want you to do, and this is what a lot of us do, is we break down these big themes into smaller bite-sized themes, and before we know it, we've got 100, 150 separate pieces of information to try and memorize. And I can't do that, and I don't know about you, but I can't do that. But what I can do is look at the big picture and go, right, these are the three main things. What is knowledge? Perception is a source of knowledge. Reason is a source of knowledge. Okay, what fits under perception as a source of knowledge? Direct, indirect, idealism. What fits under reason? Well, that's going to be innatism, intuition, deduction theories. And what fits under what is knowledge? So that's going to be starting off with JTB, justified true belief. And then because of the Getty account of examples, then that is going to lead me to infallibilism, reliabilism, virtue epistemology, and no false lemmas. Right, okay. Now, I've not had to memorize a textbook to get all of that, but I have been able to almost like anchor my individual piece of knowledge into the big scheme. Okay, and that's what we need to do when we're revising, when we are learning. Where does this fit in with the big picture? So have the big picture, see where it all fits in. That's where it starts off. I'll do your mind map. I will do whatever you want to do, so long as you have the main themes there, like I've got in the PowerPoint. Not too much detail, but just the main themes. It's almost like a web page. You imagine each of those different words is a hyperlink. Click on the hyperlink. So I'll click on direct realism, bang, and that takes me to another page where I can go into a little bit more detail about direct realism. Okay, and some of the problems with direct realism. And then on direct realism, there'll be four main arguments against it. One of them is going to be perceptual variation. So bang, click on perceptual variation. That takes me to another page and a bit about Bertrand Russell and the example of the table that he's putting forward as the main argument against direct realism. So I'm not putting too much information in each individual piece of paper, but I am seeing the connection between the different ideas. Now, if we can get used to doing that, then that is going to help you remember this in the long term. Okay, but it takes practice.